The story begins long before the empath recognizes their gift. In a place where innocence is weighted with burdens it never chose to carry, the child does not enter the world thinking they will be the scapegoat. No child ever does. But within the silent structure of the family, roles are assigned without words, and the sensitive one is often chosen as the vessel. They become the mirror upon which all the hidden shame, guilt, and unresolved tension of the family is projected. They are too gentle to deflect it, too receptive to refuse it, too undefended to resist it. So it seeps into them like rain into bare earth, shaping their identity before they have even discovered their own voice. The scapegoat child learns quickly that love in its pure form will not be given to them without conditions. Instead, it is measured against performance, compliance, silence, or the ability to absorb blame that belongs to others. They come to understand that peace in the home is often purchased at their expense. For if they carry the chaos, others can appear innocent. This injustice is not seen by outsiders. To the world, the family may look intact, even functional. But behind the closed doors, there is always one child upon whom the spotlight of accusation falls. The child does not yet know that they are stepping into a lifelong initiation. All they can feel is the pain of rejection, the loneliness of being marked as different. When something goes wrong, it is their fault. When emotions run high, it is their presence that is questioned. Even when they succeed, the light of their achievement is dimmed by criticism, comparison, or cold indifference. In these moments, they are not simply learning to bear blame. They are unconsciously being taught how to carry the weight of shadow itself, and here lies the paradox. The scapegoat child, though shamed and silenced, becomes the one who sees what others refuse to face. By being forced into the role of carrier, their vision sharpens to details no one else notices. They feel the shifts in tone, the sudden silences, the storm gathering beneath a smile. They become attuned to the hidden, not because they want to, but because survival demands it. In order to stay safe, they must read every flicker of emotion in the room. They must become experts in decoding the unspoken language of tension and turmoil. While others in the family remain blind to dysfunction, the scapegoat sees it clearly. Their pain becomes their first lesson in perception. The injustice burns, but within that fire a peculiar awareness is forged. They begin to sense the emptiness behind words, the cracks in the facade of perfection, the truth that lives beneath denial. Though the child may not have the language to name what they see, their body remembers. Their nervous system becomes a compass pointing toward hidden truths long before the mind can articulate them. It is a heavy crown for a child to wear. To be blamed is to feel unworthy, to carry the lie that one's very existence is wrong. Yet deep within that lie exists a seed of awakening. Because they are cast out from the illusion, they are forced to live in reality. They may long for acceptance, for comfort, for belonging. But what they receive instead is sight. And sight, though painful, is the beginning of wisdom. The scapegoat is not only the rejected one, they are also the chosen one, though not in the way the child imagines. They are chosen to carry the burden of what no one else will touch. They are chosen to feel what others numb. They are chosen to see what others pretend is not there. And in this role, as unfair and isolating as it is, they begin the journey that will someday transform them into the empath. The path of the scapegoat begins in sorrow. But within that sorrow lies the seed of profound transformation. For the one who carries the shadow will someday discover that they were never cursed, only being prepared for the gift of vision. There comes a moment in the life of the scapegoat child when the wound becomes more than a private pain. It becomes a portal. This wound is not like the physical injuries that heal with time or are soothed with gentle care. It is a wound of the soul, a tear in the fabric of belonging. It comes not through a single blow, but through 1,000 small cuts, through looks that reject, through words that pierce, through the silent erasure of their presence. It is the wound of knowing far too early that love is not always safe, and that trust can be shattered in the very place it was meant to grow. This wound changes how the child perceives. It refines them in ways they cannot understand. While other children play with innocence, this child scans for shifts in the atmosphere. They hear the footsteps on the stairs and already know whether anger or calm is coming. They watch the movements of a parent's hand and understand whether it carries comfort or threat. Their body becomes a tuning fork vibrating to the frequencies others cannot feel. The wound becomes an uninvited teacher, forcing their awareness open before they are ready. In that constant hypervigilance, something profound begins. The nervous system learns to be watchful, never fully resting. Even in quiet moments, the child does not trust that peace will last. This perpetual alertness leaves its mark, but it also gives them a knowing that runs deeper than sight. They can feel emotions before words reveal them. They can sense lies in the spaces between sentences. They know when affection is genuine and when it masks resentment beneath a smile. The tragedy of this wound is that it isolates. To see so much is to feel separate from others. The child wonders why no one else notices the contradictions. Why does no one else feel the storm building in the room? Why does no one else sense the heaviness behind a sigh or the meaning hidden inside silence? In this isolation, they carry a secret awareness. They are awake in a home where others sleep. Yet what feels like a curse in childhood becomes the forging of vision. Every painful truth chisels away their innocence. But with each cut, the eyes of the soul open wider. They learn not only to hear what is said, but to see what is concealed. They understand that the surface rarely tells the whole story. Behind anger, there is often fear. Behind cruelty, there is often deep pain. Behind neglect, there is sometimes the echo of wounds passed down through generations. The wound that opened the vision is not gentle. It shatters the child's trust in surfaces. But in that shattering, it gives them a rare ability to perceive truth. They begin to sense the currents that flow beneath every interaction, the unspoken contracts, the roles people play to hide their fragility. It is not understanding they seek. It is understanding that seeks them. And it does not come with comfort. It comes with burden. To live with this wound is to carry both danger and gift. The danger is that the child may drown in the flood of perception, overwhelmed by what they know, unable to shield themselves from what others project. But the gift is that they grow into a being who sees truth more fully than most, one who can penetrate through lies and touch the core of human nature. The wound is the beginning of the empath's vision. It is the unwanted initiation that separates them from ordinary knowing. They do not choose it, but it chooses them, and though it carves pain into their early years, it also plants within them the seed of extraordinary sight. The wound that once marked them as vulnerable becomes the very source of their power, for it has taught them to see what others cannot. The child who has been marked as different learns to survive in silence. They carry their pain quietly, but within that silence, something remarkable is happening. While the world thinks they are simply enduring, they are actually being trained in a hidden curriculum. This training is not taught with books or lessons. It is taught through the raw experience of living in an environment where every moment must be read with precision. To survive is to observe, and to observe is to transform. Every glance becomes a lesson. The child notices how an eyebrow raises just slightly when irritation is building, how a parent's voice changes by the smallest tone before anger erupts. Every breath becomes a signal. They learn that silence does not always mean peace. Sometimes it means the storm is gathering. Even laughter can carry multiple meanings, sometimes genuine, sometimes sharp with sarcasm disguised as humor. The scapegoat child cannot afford to miss these details, for their safety depends on prediction. So their awareness intensifies until it moves beyond the surface, teaching them to read not only faces but energies, not only words, but the weight that lingers behind them. It may seem from the outside like the child is passive, simply enduring the harshness of their environment. But inside they are developing an inner sight. They are learning to translate what is unspoken. They can stand in a room and feel the currents no one acknowledges. They learn to sense when someone is hurt but hiding it, when someone is angry but masking it with charm. Their gift begins as a necessity, but it evolves into an awareness that borders on the mystical. What others dismiss as overthinking or imagination is actually the awakening of perception. The child is not imagining. They are knowing what others are too blind or too numb to see. In their silence, they are gathering wisdom. In their pain, they are developing vision. This training is hidden because it is forged in suffering, but it is also sacred because it prepares the child for a role they cannot yet imagine. This awareness does not come without cost. The child often feels drained, exhausted by the weight of what they absorb. They may feel as if they carry emotions that don't belong to them, as though every room they enter imprints itself upon their nervous system. And yet, though burdensome, this weight is also a deep education. They learn compassion not as a concept, but as a lived reality, to feel another's unspoken grief, to sense the truth behind their facade becomes instinctive. What others call intuition is for them a language they were forced to learn in order to survive. The silent training of awareness creates a paradox within the child. On one hand, they long to be invisible, to escape the attention of those who blame them. On the other hand, their very survival depends on seeing everything clearly. They become vigilant, almost invisible, yet their inner sight expands until it touches depths of truth few will ever know. What began as hypervigilance becomes perception, and what began as self-protection becomes a gift of understanding. They cannot yet see that this training is shaping their future. To them, it feels like a burden, a strange heaviness that makes them feel out of place among their peers. While other children play easily, they are already reading the sadness in a teacher's eyes, already sensing the anger behind another child's cruelty. They cannot turn it off, and they do not yet know that they are being prepared for a path that will someday transform their pain into wisdom. In time, the silent training reveals its true purpose. The child who once felt powerless begins to understand that their awareness allows them to navigate life differently. They see through surfaces. They recognize truth hidden beneath lies, and they carry a capacity to connect with others at a depth that feels almost supernatural. What was once merely survival becomes the foundation of their calling. The scapegoat, child shaped by silence and refined by pain, emerges with vision that can see what most ignore. Their training was never chosen, but it has given them a rare gift, the gift of awareness that will someday become the core of their power. There is a moment in the life of the wounded child when innocence shatters. It does not happen all at once, but through a gradual accumulation of betrayals, a quiet realization that love will not come in the way they had hoped. At first they believe that if they try harder, if they behave better, if they stay small and hidden, affection will finally find them. They wait with open arms, but the comfort they crave never stays. And then one day it becomes clear. Protection will not come. Love will not shield them. Safety will not be guaranteed. In that moment, something breaks inside. The child who once looked at the world with unguarded wonder begins to see the cracks. This shattering of innocence is devastating. Yet it is also the turning point that shapes the empath. The eyes that once searched for comfort now learn to see reality. They notice the gap between what is said and what is felt. They sense the hollowness in a parent's reassurance, the way a compliment can carry contempt in its undertone. What once was accepted without question is now examined with a depth that only pain can summon. The world no longer appears simple. It reveals itself as layered, contradictory, and filled with masks. The child begins to understand what others deny. They comprehend that love can coexist with cruelty, that attention can walk beside neglect, that those who hurt are often the same ones who claim they care. This knowledge is heavy for a young soul, but it births a form of vision that innocence alone could never provide. In being forced to see behind the veil, the child reaches a profound truth. They begin to sense that human beings are not only what they show, but also what they hide. This awakening is not born of choice but of necessity. To survive, the child must learn to discern reality beneath surfaces. They cannot rely on words, for words often deceive. They cannot rely on promises, for promises often break. Instead, they rely on feeling, on the unspoken signs that reveal what is true. Their awareness becomes sharper, their perception keener. They begin to sense the separation between intention and action, between mask and core. They see what others ignore because they no longer have the luxury of blindness. The shattering of innocence is painful because it strips them of the simple trust that love is safe. Yet at the same time it creates depth. They no longer float on the shallow surface of life. They are pulled into the currents, into the hidden truths that shape human relationships. This awareness may isolate them, for few around them can understand what they see. Yet it also prepares them for the role they are destined to play. To be an empath is to walk with eyes open, to live with the capacity to sense beyond surfaces, and that journey begins the moment innocence falls away. The paradox is that what feels like loss is also the gift. The child mourns the end of simplicity, the end of believing that love is unconditional. But in that mourning, a new way of seeing is born. They develop a perception that cuts through deception, a sight that can hold both light and darkness together without looking away. They no longer cling to the comforting lie that people are either good or bad. They see the complexity, the contradictions, the wounds within the ones who wound. This depth allows them to survive in ways others cannot. It gives them the strength to navigate difficult relationships, to endure environments that would shatter those who remain blind. And more than that, it gives them the gift of truth. They may ache under the weight of what they see, but they are also freed from the illusions that keep others trapped. The shattering of innocence is not the end of the child's story. It is the gateway into their truest vision. For in the moment they realize love will not protect them, they also discover the capacity to see love and pain, truth and deception, shadow and light as parts of the same wholeness. And from this sight, the empath begins to emerge. The scapegoat child eventually discovers something almost unthinkable. The very shadow that once seemed to overwhelm them begins to reveal its hidden gift. It is not the kind of gift that comes with joy or ease. It is the kind that is forged in fire, the kind that looks at first like a curse. When a child is rejected, blamed, or made invisible, they are thrust into contact with the darkest parts of human nature. They come to know cruelty, neglect, manipulation, and silence in ways most would rather turn away from. Yet within this unwanted knowledge, something powerful grows. In surviving what others avoid, they begin to recognize that shadow is not simply destruction. It carries within it a strange seed, a possibility of transformation. The child learns that pain is not only devastation, but also portal. They come to understand that the darkness can strip away illusions, leaving behind the raw substance of truth. It is not easy for them to accept this. At first they may believe they are only broken, only scarred. They may see themselves as damaged by the burden they were forced to carry. But with time they realize that their capacity to hold both pain and survival has carved out a strength few possess. Through cruelty they learn compassion. The wounds they endured give them a sensitivity to the wounds of others. They know what silence feels like, so they can hear the unspoken cries of those around them. They know what it means to feel invisible, so they naturally notice those who are overlooked. They know what it means to carry unbearable weight, so they offer a presence that lightens the load of others. Out of what appeared to be pure destruction emerges the ability to heal. This paradox is the strange gift of the shadow. It teaches the empath that the deepest shadow can open the doorway to the brightest light. But this lesson is not learned in comfort. It is learned in moments of isolation, in moments of despair, in the ache of being misunderstood. Each experience shapes them not only by hurting them, but by expanding their capacity to feel. While others may remain numb or disconnected, they are forced into depth. And in that depth they discover the hidden treasures of the soul. The shadow does not only wound, it also refines. The scapegoat child, living with rejection, begins to develop an inner strength that cannot be taken away. They understand that even when love was withheld, they still survived. Even when belonging was denied, they still found ways to endure. Even when they were told they were not enough, something inside them quietly resisted and kept moving forward. This resilience is born from shadow, and it is the foundation of their power. What they once saw as weakness reveals itself as a form of sight. To suffer and still remain open, to be broken and still be able to care is no small feat. It requires a strength that goes beyond survival. It requires the capacity to transform wounds into wisdom. The empath does not simply escape their pain. They allow it to teach them. They discover that the shadow does not exist only to destroy, but also to awaken. In time, they begin to see that their life has been shaped not by accident, but by initiation. The shadow they carried was the teacher that no one else could provide. It showed them the truth of human nature, the reality that light and shadow are interwoven. It gave them the capacity to look at pain without flinching, to stand in the presence of another's suffering without turning away. And it is this capacity that sets them apart. For the world does not need those who deny the shadow. It needs those who can walk into it with eyes open and bring back the light. The scapegoat child becomes the empath because they learn to hold both the wound and the wisdom, both the grief and the compassion. They understand that the shadow is not only a place of loss, but also a place of becoming. For in walking through it, they discover the gift hidden at its heart, the gift of a love that is deeper, a vision that is clearer, and a strength that can never be taken away. There comes a time when the scapegoat begins to understand that what was once their deepest curse carries within it the seed of sight. For so long they lived on the margins, rejected, silenced, made to believe they were unworthy of belonging. They were cast outside of the circle of acceptance, labeled as the outsider, the one who would never quite fit. And yet it is precisely in this exile that their transformation begins. When you are denied a place within the illusions of the family, you are forced to see the world without them. You are not protected by denial. You are not comforted by lies. You are pushed into reality, and reality, though painful, becomes the fire that awakens the vision of the seer. The exiled one learns to look with separate eyes. While others cling to surfaces they see beneath the veneer. They notice the fault lines in relationships, the subtle tensions that no one dares speak of, the contradictions between words and actions. Their sight becomes refined not because they sought it, but because they had no choice. To survive as the scapegoat, they had to develop a way of seeing that would keep them safe. What began as hypervigilance evolves into intuition. What began as self-protection evolves into wisdom. Exile carries its own form of initiation. To be exiled is to be stripped of illusions. It is to feel the pain of rejection so deeply that you can never again mistake false belonging for genuine connection. The scapegoat discovers that acceptance at the cost of truth is no acceptance at all. And so in their separation they begin to value authenticity over approval. They start to see clearly that most people live behind masks, that most relationships are woven with unspoken compromises, and that most souls are afraid of exposure. They know this because they have lived it, because their own exile was built on the refusal of others to face what was real. What others interpret as weakness in the scapegoat becomes over time their deepest power. Their sensitivity is no longer only a burden, it becomes a compass. They can feel the currents of energy in a room. They can sense the unspoken emotions of those around them. They can discern when someone is hiding their true face. While others are distracted by surfaces, they have learned to pay attention to essence. This is the gift of the seer. The one who was once silenced now carries a vision that cannot be silenced. It is a lonely gift at first. To see so deeply is to stand apart. The scapegoat may struggle to share their perceptions, for others are not ready to hear the truths they know. They may be dismissed as dramatic, too sensitive, even delusional. But in time they learn to trust their sight. They learn that what they know is real, even if others cannot recognize it. And as this trust grows, their exile shifts from being a punishment to becoming a calling. They understand that they were not cast outside simply to suffer, but to learn to see from a place others could not access. The fire that once burned them now becomes the light by which they guide others. They are no longer only the scapegoat who carried blame. They are the seer who carries vision. They have walked through rejection and found resilience. They have survived the breaking of belonging and found authenticity. They have faced the shadow and found light within it. These are not small achievements. They are the marks of transformation, the signs that what was once meant to destroy them has instead prepared them. The scapegoat becomes the seer because exile was never only about rejection, it was initiation into a different way of seeing. And when they finally understand this, they understand that their pain was not meaningless. It was shaping them into the one who could guide, the one who could heal, the one who could perceive truth where others see only illusion. The exiled one steps back into the world not as the silenced victim, but as the one who carries vision. For the eyes of the seer are forged in the fire of rejection. The journey of the wounded child does not end in exile, nor in silence, nor even in the discovery of sight. It reaches its fulfillment when the one who was once scapegoat steps fully into the truth of their being and embraces the identity of the empath. This awakening is not a sudden event, but a gradual unfolding. the slow realization that the pain of the past was not a punishment but a passage. Every wound carried, every rejection endured, every shadow faced has been shaping them for this moment. They begin to understand that their ability to feel so deeply is not a flaw but a gift, not a burden but a calling. The awakening of the empath comes quietly at first. It begins in the recognition that they can sense the emotions of others with remarkable clarity. They realize they are able to stand with someone's grief and feel it as if it were their own. They notice how they can walk into a room and know without a word spoken who is hurting, who is hiding, who is longing to be seen. What once made them feel strange and out of place now reveals itself as extraordinary. This awareness that once caused exhaustion and confusion becomes a compass that guides them toward connection and healing. Yet this awakening is not without challenge. The empath must learn to navigate the weight of feeling so much. Without boundaries, they risk drowning in the emotions of others. Without discernment, they risk confusing another's pain for their own. The same gift that allows them to heal can also consume them if not understood. And so the empath learns a new lesson. To feel deeply does not mean to carry everything. To be open does not mean to be unprotected. The awakening requires balance, the capacity to remain grounded while still sensing the currents of others. What defines the empath is not only the ability to feel, but the capacity to transform what they feel into compassion. Because they know the taste of rejection, they choose inclusion. Because they know the ache of invisibility, they see others with rare clarity. Because they know what it is to walk in shadow, they bring light to those still lost in it. The very wounds that once threatened to break them now shape the way they care. Their heart is marked by tenderness, not because their life was easy, but because it was not. The empath's awakening also brings with it a profound understanding of human nature. They no longer see people as simple or one-dimensional. They have lived too close to shadow to fall into such illusions. They know that cruelty often masks fear, that coldness often hides grief, that control often conceals fragility. This insight allows them to hold others with patience, to approach even those who hurt with a depth of understanding. They can separate the person from the pain, the mask from the truth. And in doing so, they become healers not only of others but also of themselves. There is a sacred power in the empath's presence. Without needing to speak, they can create spaces where others feel safe to reveal themselves. Without needing to fix, they can hold another's pain in a way that makes healing possible. Their gift is not in doing, but in being, not in forcing change, but in allowing truth to rise to the surface. They become mirrors in which others see themselves more clearly, and guides who can walk beside those in pain without turning away. This final transformation is not about escaping their past, but integrating it. The empath comes to understand that they were never only the scapegoat, never only the wounded child. They were always being shaped into someone who could hold depth, who could see truth, who could love with a wholeness that others might never reach. Their awakening is the recognition that their life holds meaning, that their pain was not wasted, that their path has always been leading them here. The empath stands now in the fullness of their being, no longer defined by blame or exile, but by the strength and compassion forged from the journey. They have walked through shadow, endured the shattering of innocence, and discovered the strange gifts hidden in their wounds. And in this awakening, they understand that they were not broken but prepared, not cursed but chosen to walk the path from pain into profound understanding.